Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast, right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Joined as always by Ohio Senate President Matt Huffman, a Republican from Lima, and of course, Senator Rob McColley. Good to have him back on the program, a Republican from Napoleon, Ohio. Still talking a whole lot about Joe Biden and the ballot, what we did, what the House did, or really what the House didn't do. But in our session this week, we did make some tweaks to Senate Bill 215, what we had actually put into a House bill that would have put Joe Biden on the ballot that they have taken no action on. But we amended House Bill 305 that addresses foreign election interference, basically outlaws contributions coming into ballot campaigns in Ohio, saying that they can't be from outside of the United States. So what exactly did we do with these amendments to clarify?
Well, there were a couple things. There were some folks, frankly, I think there's a little bit of a scare tactic on some of the groups, claiming that banning foreign money would somehow affect, in a pretty attenuated way, the things, how this bill would affect them, So those several groups, we sat down and said, well, what's the problem? And we said, okay, well, we'll change the language in a particular way, and that solved those problems. So I don't think there were problems, but now those groups are satisfied.
So we sent it back over to the House, and we'll just step back, and Senator McColley, I'll have you talk about Senate Bill 215 as it was amended into House Bill 114, which put Joe Biden on the ballot and also solved or aligned the ballot law in Ohio with what we already do with candidate campaigns. We outlaw contributions coming from outside the United States.
Yeah, so obviously we talked a little bit about Senate Bill 114 that included the Biden ballot fix, if you will. We thought it was important to give Ohioans that choice, even though I feel comfortable saying no member of our caucus is going to vote for Joe Biden. And I feel comfortable saying it's going to go probably the same way it did 4 years ago with Donald Trump securely winning the state of Ohio. Nevertheless, Ohioans deserve that choice. That was one upcoming threat to the election. The other was, of course, this foreign election interference and meddling that we're seeing from foreign billionaires in Ohio issues campaigns to the tune of $14 million last year alone. Not our numbers. These are numbers that are pretty widely reported, even in the media. And then to the tune that we know of that's happening right now of several $1 million as well, just coming in this year. This is a clear and present threat to Ohio's elections. It's something that needs immediate action. And despite our best efforts in working through these issues and trying to pass something that's still going to have the teeth to be enforceable and provide legitimate deterrence to this type of behavior, unfortunately, still haven't been able to get the House to take action on it.
Well, it's really interesting, too, when you hear Democrats say, and in fact, this week during session, the minority leader, Senator Antonio, said, you can bet that our members do not want foreign election interference. We don't want foreign dollars into our campaigns, yet they won't vote to support this. Why do you think that is?
Well, it benefits the Democratic Party. It benefits the folks who are really pushing these issues, which largely are not Ohioans. This is a national group, and of course with international support, who are trying to change the makeup of the Ohio congressional delegation and the Ohio General Assembly to the extent that the General Assembly. But the big prize, of course, is Congress. If they can, through gerrymandering, steal 4 or 5 seats in Ohio, that's going to, of course, help in Washington. A lot of these foreign actors would rather have Democrats in charge of the House of Representatives than Republicans.
And it's a much easier campaign to run on the redistricting issue, the Citizens Not Politicians campaign that we've talked about a lot here, and we'll continue to talk about it. But it's a lot easier when you have all of these foreign millions of dollars coming in that you don't have to raise locally, or at least regionally within the state of Ohio.
It's amazing that the Democrats, I'll give them a lot of credit. They're very good at deflection. And it's amazing how good they are at pointing the finger at Republicans and blaming Republicans for somehow being the chief beneficiary of dark money. But that's far from the truth. Anybody who's actually done any sort of research on it will tell you that the Democrat web of dark money and political money laundering is far outweighs by multitudes anything that would be on the right. And quite frankly, this is a big piece of it. As I mentioned before, it's political money laundering. And in Ohio, I would guess, even just for this November, it's going to be into 8 figures, the amount of money that will be directly linked to foreign nationals.
Yeah, that's really chilling, because as we talked as well in the past, if not even last year, we talked about how Ohio is an easy target with the Constitution that you can change through a statewide ballot initiative if you get 50% plus one. So if you do enough campaign advertising, you put $60 million into a ballot issue, you have a pretty good chance of getting 50% plus one. Why do you think I wanted to read this quote from the speaker this week when he was asked about Joe Biden and the ballot and Senate Bill 215. So again, you can look it up. It's House Bill 114 that we amended Senate Bill 215 into. And his quote was regarding Joe Biden and the ballot, and are you going to do something about what the Senate sent over? He said, quote, "There's just not the will to do that. It's a hyper-political year. It's a hyper-political environment at this time of year, rather. And there are some Republicans who just didn't want to vote on it. And there were some who did want to. I think there are other alternatives to it. So why create a stir? That's not necessary." Now, when he said there's some Republicans just don't want to vote for it, he was talking about Senate Bill 92 that they amended. And the message was, guess what? There's broad support of this to put Joe Biden on the ballot in both chambers, and then it never moved. So here's an easy fix. As you told the reporters during the post-session gaggle this week, everybody gets a little something. You get Joe Biden on the ballot, and it seems like everybody, at least on paper, agrees that nobody wants foreign election interference, whether it's for a candidate campaign or for an issue campaign, yet it doesn't move in the House chamber. And then Republicans are blamed for keeping Joe Biden off the ballot. So which is it, I guess?
Yeah, well, it really is baffling that the people who often say we need people to work across the aisle and compromise. And what we simply said was there's a lot of Republicans who are not going to vote for a freestanding bill. And there was a story in several of the papers the day before the May 8th session saying this is all agreed to. It's coming out of the committee. We've got the votes. The Senate has agreed to it. They never checked with us about it. And the governor wants it. And voila, the bill never comes up. So it's a bit mystifying, but it's clear here that the Democrats care more about making sure foreign money continues to flow into the state of Ohio than they do getting Joe Biden on the ballot. And they think it will eventually happen anyway through the courts or some other way. So that's essentially, and we need to maybe retreat back to a year, May of 23, when we began talking about this problem, the fact that outside influences, national and international money, were going to come into Ohio and change our Constitution and form it in the way that people outside Ohio want to do. And that's why we said, well, it ought to be harder to amend the Constitution. Ohio is one of the few states that it's allowed to be done without going to the legislature, and one of the fewer states that allows only 50% plus one. So we went to the ballot in August. All these foreign national folks put a pile of money into that election in August. Of course, the initiative didn't pass. They put a pile more into legalizing all abortions and legalizing marijuana. That is their legislative agenda. So here we are a year later, and of course it's still happening. Now we're simply trying to say, we shouldn't have people in Switzerland and China and other places affecting our elections, which all the Democrats agree, but they don't want to do anything about it.
One of the things, too, you better be careful with what you wish for, is what I'm thinking, Democrats, because at some point when you have so many progressive left types of ballot initiatives out there, sooner or later you get something that you don't want on the ballot that maybe undermines your own narrative or undermines your own strategy. And that is something, too, that we were with House. The House came out this week and said, well, listen, we have a way to address this. It's House Bill 609. But it's their answer to Senate Bill 215, the foreign election interference. But I'm calling it the foreign election interference paper tiger, House Bill 609, because a lot of the teeth that was in Senate Bill 215, if not all of the tiger's teeth that was in Senate Bill 215 is gone, including, and I just have a list here, removes mandatory triple damages language, which means that if you're found guilty of using contributions from outside the United States in an issue campaign, it's going to cost you 3 times the amount of the original funding, correct?
Correct.
Removes requirement that illegal contributions be returned. I think it seems like, it would be a no-brainer that you would have to send the money back. Removes the criminal penalty for accepting foreign money related to treasurers certifying or to the treasurer that is running that campaign. Why is that important?
So this is the enforcement mechanism. Really, what they've done is they passed something that simply said, we don't want foreign money in our elections, but there is no enforcement mechanism for either the foreign contributor or the middlemen that we see who are involved in this. And so you look at the foreign contributor, it's saying, thou shalt not do this, okay? That's good. But then it goes farther and it says, well, what's the penalties? There's no mandatory fines. There's no penalties associated with the middlemen, who are the domestic C4s or the domestic dark money groups that are taking this money and acting as basically accomplices to this criminal conspiracy to launder this political money in from foreign sources. No penalties to them, no accountability on them, no real teeth to it to be able to stop this practice. But hey, somebody did something, I suppose.
Yeah, the really hilarious part about this is it also only applies to ballot initiatives that start in the legislature. So the people who are doing this, paying signature gatherers and putting stuff on the ballot, even the very minimal that 609 does, it doesn't apply to them anyway. So this is designed to say, look what we're doing. We're taking care of this issue, but it's letting the same people do the same thing anyway.
Right. It only applies to citizen-led initiatives, right?
Yeah. That's the most glaring issue here is the 1630 fund that we've talked about, which is the chief vehicle for the tens of millions of dollars that Hans-Jörg Wyss is putting into Ohio and the hundreds of millions of dollars that Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss is putting in nationally. Is what's called a continuing association under Ohio Revised Code. That being that it is a dark money group that is perpetual. It doesn't have an end. It's not set up for a specific purpose. It just keeps going. Their bill doesn't even include continuing associations in it. So based on what we've been able to see and based on our own interpretation, it wouldn't even address the 1630 fund and Hans-Jörg Wyss's foreign election interference through his hundreds of millions of dollars that he's putting out there. It does nothing.
Right, because in 2023, the 1630 fund, which is, as you said, a continuing association, spent more than $13 million just from their fund on all 3 Ohio ballot campaigns last year. The same fund received more than $220 million from Hans-Jörg Wyss since 2016. It's like it's an unlimited funding source. So we're going to say we're against foreign election interference, but really we support foreign election interference because that's how Democrats have been able to make changes and legislate by constitutional amendment, which is a really terrible way to run the government.
Yeah, and so constitutions are supposed to set out basic governmental frameworks to protect the rights of the citizens against the government, but it's not supposed to inject special rights for special people. And I've criticized the casino industry. I've criticized a lot of folks who have used the Constitution to get special rights in the state of Ohio. And rather than have the elected General Assembly, which it changes from time to time, and when Democrats, of course, were in charge, they were fine with not changing the Constitution. Now that they're not, they'd rather do this constitutional amendment route. And again, I would hasten to add, the money and the structure and the power for this is coming out of Washington and internationally. Now, there are some local actors who are spokesmen for those, but they know that they've got to take marching orders from Eric Holder, from the 1630 Fund and groups like that.
And the result will be if it gets on the ballot, which most likely it will, citizens, not politicians, which is really progressive leftists, not citizens, and having a total undoing of what you, the Ohio voter, passed in 2015 and 2018 by more than 70% of the vote under our current redistricting process that produced bipartisan unanimous maps back in October 2023 from the Ohio Redistricting Commission. That's all going to be undone. Recent podcast, Senator McColley, that you and I did, you said if you hated the snake on the lake, it's coming back if this passes, and they're going to have plenty of funding coming to do so.
Absolutely, because there's only, it's been well documented, there are only so many precincts in the entire state, and they're all concentrated in urban areas that even have majority Democrat populations. In order to draw Democrat districts, you need to have majority Democrat populations. What we've seen across the state of Ohio is that those Democrat populations are highly clustered in precincts that oftentimes vote 80% or more, at least 70% or more Democrat. The only way you can have the city of Toledo in a securely Democrat district, because the city of Toledo's population is maybe about 240,000 people. The population of Lucas County is around 400,000 or so. The population of a congressional district is about 786,000. So you do the math. Toledo isn't as dominant of a presence in a congressional district as maybe it once was, at least to influence the political outcome. So the only way regarding the collar counties and communities around Toledo that you can actually put Toledo in a solid Democrat district is you run it along the lake into the western suburbs of Cleveland and western side of Cleveland. That's the only way you can run a Democrat index in that district up above 55%.
And by the way, when that was done in 2011, the snake on the lake was created. That was done at the request of the Democratic Party. That was part of our compromise to get them to vote for the map so that we wouldn't have more litigation and we'd be able to move it on. And of course, they wanted to make sure that Marcy Kaptur would be elected instead of Dennis Kucinich. So we agreed, and they provided the votes for the emergency clause, and it went into place. So, but the problem with the current is there will be no compromise. There will be no discussion. Strange people who no one will know in the public will be drawing these maps, and they'll be doing it to essentially eliminate the kinds of districts and the kind of compromise that we talk about. Basically, especially it relates to the General Assembly map, most of those urban districts, many of which are represented by African Americans, are going to go away. And as I've mentioned before, if you don't believe me, go look what happened in Michigan. Same kind of map drawing. The federal court up there said that the map violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For the first time in 70 years, the city of Detroit does not have an African American representing them in the United States Congress under this new map. And that's what's coming to Ohio if this passes in November.
And if it passes in November, also, there'll be no way for people to complain because the legislature won't be part of the process, right? The General Assembly, which you, the voter, sends an elected official for your Senate district and for your State House district. You can't complain to them because they have no power to change it. The only way it could be changed if it was repealed, if it did pass. So that should be the really chilling message that funds coming from outside of the United States to change the political makeup and the political districts in Ohio, you, the Ohio voter, will have absolutely no one to complain to. It'll be out of your hands as well.
You know, people, not politicians, should be called political outcomes, not communities at the end of the day, because what the voters passed in 2015 and 2018 was a repudiation in many respects of the community splitting that had been occurring in previous maps. And so what the Democrats have realized is that because of the concentration that they see in many of these urban areas of Democrat votes is that they have to crack up urban communities and separate neighborhoods if they want to create a map that they want that's going to give them a majority, which is why when the constitutional amendment that could be on the ballot this November comes up, it prioritizes political outcomes above all else. to the exclusion of everything else, which is why the snake on the lake and many other bad creations that people look at as gerrymandering are going to come back.
Candidates, campaigns, and issues matters is what we like to say around here, but if this passes, none of that matters because it's going to be drawn based on a fixed percentage of, they call it representational fairness. It's really gerrymandering. Back to House Bill 609, how it differs from Senate Bill 215, which your bill has all the teeth in keeping dark money coming from outside the United States out of Ohio. Explain this part. Removes a change that prohibited green card holders from contributing to Ohio elections, consistent with issue 2 of 2022 that passed by more than 75% of the electorate. So in other words, it would allow green card holders, aka non-citizens, to contribute to elections, something that Ohio voters already banned.
So Ohio voters in issue 2 back in 2022 voted overwhelmingly, like you said, 75%, to make it so only citizens of the state of Ohio could vote in Ohio elections, whether that be at the municipal, statewide, or otherwise level. They voted, it'd be common sense. We only want citizens voting in our elections. Ergo, we should want only citizens trying to influence our elections as well. And so what we're seeing here is that the House version of the bill would allow for green card holders, people who are not citizens of the United States, to continue contributing unlimited amounts into these ballot campaigns, which obviously, as anybody could see, could very well be a loophole that you could drive a semi-truck through in order to get foreign money into these elections.
Again, Democrats supporting foreign election interference. Well, they can't vote, but they can influence the vote.
Yeah, it's yeah. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and somebody who was in state government about 15 years ago, and they said, there was a time when people would say, well, yeah, I know that's good for us, but we can't support that. And I actually sensed that in some of my colleagues here, Democratic colleagues. You heard what their comments were. Well, yeah, we're against all of that, but we got these people to say we have to do that. And even with the redistricting amendment, what's going on in November, there are some African-American legislators and former legislators who have said, well, I am against it. I do think you're right. That's what's going to happen. I just can't say that publicly. And we all get, in those positions where it's like, well, these are our friends and, all of those things happen. But, this is a very fundamental change to the republic. It's a very fundamental change to democracy. When you are drawing districts solely on the basis of politics, that's the purest form of gerrymandering, which they're saying they're trying to get rid of. It's only based on who's going to win the election in their politics, not based on communities. It's not based on all of the other things, keeping districts compact, not splitting up cities, all the things that we campaigned for in 2015 and 18, all of that goes out the window with this ballot initiative.
There has to be some teeth to any law that is passed. Senate Bill 215, plenty of teeth, ways to prosecute, ways to punish people who try to get around the law, try to launder money into our issue campaigns. Your bill, Senate Bill 215, Senator McColley, prosecuted it through the Attorney General's office, correct?
Yes. So, and that would be that's also something we put in every successive version we've tried to send over to the House, is to make sure that the Attorney General is the office that has the Election Commission has the option to send them and refer them the case. That's important for a variety of reasons. Number one, it takes a lot of the politics out of it, because the way it's set up right now is the Franklin County prosecutor would be the sole person who could handle these types of cases. And let's think about this. This is inherently an international case where you're going to potentially be going after somebody who's not a United States citizen, who may not even be in the United States at the time, and you're going to have to go after them with the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. No offense to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, but I think they have much better uses of their time than trying to run an international white-collar criminal prosecution. Whereas in our bill, we say, look, We acknowledge that this is affecting a statewide election. That's one of the changes we made. This only impacts statewide ballot initiatives. It's affecting a statewide election, ergo, the Attorney General, with the full force and effect of the entire state of Ohio, should be the one that tries to bring these cases to justice.
Yeah, House Bill 609, they want to try to keep it in Franklin County.
Yeah, and you know, we've had this discussion recently about Franklin County judges enjoining state law, and you know, I think goes without saying that only voters in Franklin County are voting for those officials, but they're voting for them to do the things that Franklin County cares about, like making sure that you're prosecuting criminals and trying to keep violence. And we've had some terrible incidents lately near downtown where we all work. And so I think that's what people are thinking of. But Senator McColley hit it on the head. That office isn't equipped to go find out this. It would take a whole new pile of money that the Attorney General has already been allotted to enforcing these kinds of laws.
It's also, speaking of Franklin County, a lot of news coming out of Franklin County because of a Franklin County judge that had placed a stay on House Bill 68. It's not uncommon to see a county common pleas court judge place, I think you call it an injunction, not being a lawyer. Occasionally I play one on television. But to place an injunction temporarily suspending the implementation of a law that the General Assembly has passed and the governor has signed. But what we're seeing more and more, I call it bench shopping, and you're seeing one judge in one big metropolitan county where there are maybe no Republican judges that were elected. In fact, Senator DeMora, a Democrat in the Senate, said on his floor speech, well, we got rid of all those judges, saying we got rid of all those Republican judges in Franklin County. This week he said that. And so you have one judge who doesn't like whatever part of a law that is passed, and then basically has the power of the governor's veto pen for an extended period of time. Is this something that the legislature should be addressing to make, okay, well, a judge has the power at the common pleas court level to suspend a state law, but then we shouldn't be leaving it out there almost in perpetuity for a year or more. Shouldn't it automatically be appealed to the state Supreme Court?
Yeah, I think it should be. I think most people don't realize the importance and the power of a common pleas court judge. They have statewide jurisdiction. The reason that is if you have to issue an order that affects somebody in a different county, it's not practical for a judge not to be able to order something if you're in Lima, happen in Marietta or Youngstown or something. But a judge, of course, is elected county by county, and their job is to interpret the laws, conduct trials, do all those sorts of things. But that sort of jurisdiction didn't contemplate a judge having an emergency hearing on a temporary restraining order, which can be done by affidavits, which then you're supposed to have a preliminary injunction hearing and then a final injunction. But it didn't anticipate decisions that were going to affect the passage of constitutional laws or passed constitutionally. So a judge, it's supposed to be an emergency. I'm going to say this for now, but we're going to quickly decide this. Now, for example, with the heartbeat law, this temporary injunction went on, preliminary injunction, and it sat there for months and months and months waiting for a trial to happen. Well, that's simply defeating the democratic process through a judge doing that. So it certainly, if the injunction has to start someplace, maybe it starts with the Supreme Court or some other, and there are these, as we say, these extraordinary writs where you can go immediately to the Supreme Court where something is about to happen. But letting one judge elected by one set of county citizens affect all 88 counties, the other 87 counties, is not what's anticipated, I think, in our Constitution.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say let's keep in mind, as much as people might try to say, oh, this is a novel concept that they're creating to have a workaround, the federal rules of civil procedure work the same way, where if you have an order that basically issues an injunction, that can be appealed up to the appellate court and then to the United States Supreme Court immediately in that order. And so it's not a novel concept. There are other states that have this, and it's a reflection that in the event that the legislature acts on behalf of all of the citizens of Ohio who collectively put the legislature there, there deserves to be a review, a judicial review conducted by judges eventually, who, if it gets to that point, who also were elected by the entire citizenry of Ohio and put them there.
The other thing I would say is part of what's going on here is what happens in all societies, where in state of Ohio, you have this power which is dispersed out through the communities and the states. And slowly over time, that power comes to one central source where the government is. So last year, we decided all these administrative hearings, which could only be heard in Franklin County courts. Well, 60 years ago, it wasn't that way. You appealed to your local common pleas court from an administrative decision of a state government. And, well, the folks in Columbus said, let's do everything here. We'll have all the power. The rest of the state said, we're not going to do that anymore. So we changed that. Having everything heard by a Franklin County judge and prosecuted by a Franklin County prosecutor is part of that centralization of power, which most people say, hey, wait a minute, it's at least supposed, I may not like what my judge says or a judge in another county says, but it's at least supposed to be a democratic system. Power that becomes more and more centralized, it separates you from the people, and that's when people decide they don't like government. And we at least need to respect the very basics of what government is supposed to be, which is about the people, all of the people, not just the people who are in and around downtown Columbus.
I remember that when it came to appealing some type of an order, I believe it was always handled in Franklin County, but that's more than inconvenient and very costly to Joe Average Ohioan in Allen County or Washington County, who might have to spend 3 days, 5 days, or 2 weeks paying for a hotel, paying for gas that they don't have to always show up in Franklin County for a hearing.
Yeah. When the government's going to take your rights away from you, at least ought to be a fair fight, at least ought to be on the same playing ground. And here's your lawyer, there's my lawyer. You want to take away my liquor license in Williams County, come to Williams County and do that, and let's have the judge decide.
Final thought, Joe Biden on the ballot, it's kind of up to whatever the House wants to do or not do, and then it goes to the court, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the House, they have the option of whether they want to act. If they aren't going to vote on 114 and pass it, which clearly they have the votes to do that. Okay, if they're not going to pass Senate Bill 92 and put it as a standalone bill, I don't know whether they have the votes to do that. My guess is that all the Democrats would vote for that, whether there are another 18 or 17 Republicans, however many there are over there, to do that. Who knows? But, they've got an option. They've decided not to take up the option.
The upper chamber continues to act in good faith. Senate President Matt Huffman, thanks for your time today. Senator McColley, great to have you back on the show as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and tuning in, and we'll see you soon.